Hi everyone, thank you for being here. I'm presenting our work on the integration of VR into informal everyday context through storytelling at underserved learning environments both in Atlanta and in Mumbai. My co-authors are Aditya, Vishwanath, Naveena, Karusala, and Marisol, Wong-Villacres. And all of this work was done at the Tandem Lab at Georgia Tech. But Aditya has now moved on to do his PhD. He was my first undergraduate advisee, so I'm really proud to be presenting this paper on his behalf, but really sad that he couldn't be here because he didn't get a visa on time. But if you get a chance, please tweet at him. His Twitter handle is ADI_VISH, and wishes he could be here. Okay. So the collective vision that industry actors, policymakers, researchers, and the general public share of the future of a society plays a key role in promoting technological innovations and also legitimizing particular modes of technology use over others. In the case of virtual reality or VR, industry efforts to create products that are lower cost than ever before symbolize a vision for a society where VR is affordable and accessible to everybody. Such visions, scholars have argued, are important to bring to scrutiny because they influence which forms and uses of technology are prioritized over others. Our research explores a potential meeting point between this collective vision for VR's future and everyday contexts such as classrooms. We situate ourselves in underserved learning environments to look at how low-cost, smartphone-driven, immersive 360-degree VR might be perceived to bring value to such settings. We collected data through fieldwork at a summer camp in Atlanta in the US and an after-school center in Mumbai in India. Both cater to children from relatively socioeconomically disadvantaged communities. Through VR content creation projects that were centered around social justice topics, we used co-designed, semi-structured interviews and participant observation to examine diverse stakeholders' assumptions and beliefs around VR and to speculate and reflect on the capacities, the limitations, and applications of this technology for day-to-day use. The research questions that we addressed are, first, how might underserved learning environments engage with low-cost 360-degree VR in ways that align with stakeholders' priorities and values, their lived realities? And secondly, what are the social and technical infrastructural challenges that confront the integration of 360-degree VR in classrooms across diverse under-resourced contexts? Most VR research today that looks at the affordances or immersiveness of this medium focuses on the use of expensive head-mounted displays, multi-person virtual rooms, or entirely new prototypes of VR-centric technology. We situate our research in these diverse and underserved learning environments, paying special attention to how users engage with and respond to the integration of a new kind of technology to look at the affordances of low-cost VR in particular. A handful of studies thus far have engaged with the vision of low-cost and pervasive VR, and our own prior work, which was published at DIST 2017, looked at how an evaluation of Google expeditions in a learning environment in Mumbai, similar to the one that we studied for this research, how an evaluation of Google expeditions revealed aspirations of students and teachers with regards to engaging with VR in learning environments. Our field sites included a summer camp organized by a charter school in Atlanta and an after-school center that was run by a nonprofit in Mumbai. Both served 9th grade students, so between 13 and 16 years, as I mentioned, from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds. We deliberately chose a site in the global north and one in the global south so we could assess how VR would be received or might be received and integrated in starkly different contexts, but also comparable in some ways. So the camp was a more organized setup than the center in Mumbai and had more students. The cultural backgrounds were, of course, different. There were also race issues in Atlanta, which were not the same in India. However, research subjects at both sites did come from relatively socioeconomically weaker sections. They were keen on creating their own VR content, so specifically content creation over content consumption, and they had comparable exposure and literacies to emerging technologies in general. Our research took place in 5 stages across both settings, and I'm going to go back and forth between the methods and then the findings that we had in these 5 stages. So stage one entailed co-design, where we introduced all teachers and volunteers to the 360-degree camera. The teachers identified storytelling as an exercise that would allow students at both sites to use VR for engaging meaningfully with their surroundings. We brainstormed with teachers at both sides, and what connected with them most was this idea of content generation to cultivate social awareness. The theme of hunger and homelessness was selected for our Atlanta site, and Mumbai participants selected respect towards a person, group, or place. Teachers in Atlanta chose to focus on the city's homelessness crisis, while in Mumbai, teachers wanted students to foster respect towards their surroundings more broadly, and offered them the creative freedom to choose their demographic. In Atlanta, students used VR for storytelling about communities that they were not part of, while those in Mumbai had the freedom to engage with any community that was around them. So what did we find? While some teachers were more measured in considering the benefits of VR for instruction, they were all generally enthusiastic about introducing VR to their students, even if they were skeptical. Teachers in Atlanta were more pragmatic, measured in their enthusiasm, maybe due to greater prior exposure, and they constructed different meanings around the practicality of bringing VR into this classroom. For example, one teacher from Mumbai perceived VR to offer meaning in the form of a skill, just like why we would teach PowerPoint. A teacher from Atlanta saw it as representing an opportunity to connect students to the world around them. And another teacher in Mumbai commented on how they would definitely love to do things with VR that are space and scale related, that is taking students to spaces that they cannot necessarily access, like the depths of the ocean, the core of the earth. These trips will give my students a big picture idea. Stage two entailed learning how to use VR. And so at both sites, we began by exploring the mental models that students had around the use of VR and mapping their current understanding of this technology to the use of the cameras for filming. The students learned how to use the cameras in this duration, and the teachers, some of them also learned how to use it in this period. So we first had students open and explore the cameras in the classroom, and these cameras were both a source of curiosity and complexity. The training that we gave seemed insufficient to one of the students after the first day. As he said, I think we currently have a very surface-level understanding of what we can do. This does not mean that the students tinkering with the cameras on their own was fruitless. A teacher in Mumbai described why she liked this format, saying, I like the fact that you allow the students to figure some things out on their own first, to tinker with it a little bit to see how it's used, and in doing that, they may find ways to use it that I haven't considered. I also liked how you introduced it to them by giving some examples of how you've used it. So this reveals some trade-offs to be considered for interventions like ours, such as how much room should we give for tinkering versus how much structure should we provide for instructions. And also, we needed to factor in the fragility and the cost of these devices, more so in the case of the India study than in Atlanta. And finally, figuring out how to work with the devices that we had available with the number of students. In this next stage, students worked in their teams to brainstorm ideas for their storytelling project, narrow down ideas by clustering similar threads, carving out a cogent story, storyboarding the scenes, and creating a concrete action plan and timeline for capturing this content at different sites. For storyboarding, we use the template that is shown here. It entails a stick figure in the center and a palette, which is a complete 360-degree scene. Now, students came up with creative and involved storyboards for the scenes. Some teams seemed to enjoy the process more than others, but we saw a general clarity about the goals of the storyboarding task. So the figure above shows one set of storyboards created by a team from Atlanta, and the figure below is a storyboard from a Mumbai team. In Mumbai, students were swapping between Hindi and English, we found, while in Atlanta, the storyboards were only in English. And there are other methods for storytelling that could be used, but we chose storyboarding in particular because it allowed the students to lay out the actors, the objects, and other items in the scene before they went about filming. Students hadn't engaged in any formal storyboarding of scenes before, however, and this seemed to contribute towards less engagement in the storyboarding phase, as was expressed by a teacher in Atlanta. This impacted student engagement and enjoyment in this phase of the study, and a student from Mumbai commented on how the exercise seemed pointless. I do not understand why we have to draw out each scene and write out a description. I mean, can we just please go ahead and use the cameras already? They seem so cool, and I really do not care for doing more writing and drawing on a piece of paper. I want to go outside and shoot a movie. During the filming process, students took 360-degree photos and visited the sites recommended to them by the teachers. And in this stage, we paid special attention to the workarounds developed by students as they learned to film in VR. Each team made one movie, and at the end of this stage, students in Atlanta had collectively filmed about 15 movies, and students in Mumbai had filmed 6. The process of videography afforded students room to fail multiple times and recover from failure. And this iterative process of meaning-making was supported through the VR videography experience. A student from Mumbai described her team's process of co-learning to use and work with the cameras thus. It was trial and error. We would take multiple angle shots and then view them all on the mobile app immediately to see what they look like. If we didn't like something or wanted to change something, we would retake the shot. Hiding the camera operator is a unique challenge that comes up with recording 360-degree content. Students did not undertake the use of any sophisticated movie editing software to edit out the operator, nor did we encourage it. Rather, students resorted to hiding strategies during the videography phase. So a popular strategy in both Atlanta and Mumbai was to hide the camera operator behind still objects in the scene, such as a trash can or a tree or a car, while the camera operator remotely controlled the camera using a mobile application. In some cases, students would attach the camera to objects or surfaces, such as taping the camera onto a tree or sticking it into a soil using a wide stick, as you can see in the photo. One team was shooting a few scenes in public locations, like a bus stop, a temple courtyard, and a nearby lake. And in these cases, the camera operator played the role of a bystander or pedestrian on her phone, becoming both an actor in the scene and the camera operator. What we found was that we are offered multiple and diverse opportunities for embodiment, as well as an iterative process of failing and recovering from failure. Just to give a few examples of the scenes that students ended up creating. So in a scene that showed deforestation in Mumbai, 2 students dressed up as traditional rural farmers created an axe out of cardboard and wood and acted out a scene where one of them was about to cut down a tree but was stopped just in time by the other farmer. A team in Atlanta took the perspective of a college student who did not have money to secure food for himself and role-played a day in his life. So they strapped on the 360-degree camera onto one teammate's head and provided a first-person camera view of the entire day. A team in Mumbai wanted to show how certain public places were kept clean while others were kept dirty. So they shot 2 first-person perspectives, one of walking inside a clean temple courtyard and another of walking outside on a messy street right next to the temple. In both shots, the students added voiceovers to discuss the lessons learned. A student in Atlanta said, "When I created the movie from the perspective of the homeless person, we had to enact his day-to-day activities, such as waiting in line for food, and that's when I realized how difficult it is to survive a day." A Mumbai student described her experience playing the role of a farmer, saying role-playing as a farmer was such an eye-opening experience. Just standing in the sun shooting the scenes on the field was so difficult. Imagine using a real plow to till the land all day in that heat. Storytelling with VR offered students an opportunity to make meaning of their physical surroundings as they figured out how these constrained them or forced them to move around and find objects that they could leverage in their environments. An identical adaptation of the storyboard during the videography session was difficult since certain public locations had a different layout, different objects in the scene, and fewer or more bystanders than the students anticipated. But this situation also made students more accepting. As one student said, we were at a bus stop and wanted to shoot a scene there, but there were many people around and a lot of traffic. There wasn't anything we could do about that. So we just had to work with it and position the camera so that we captured more of what we wanted and less of what we did not want. It's hard to do this with VR since you're capturing a complete 360-degree image, but it's also a more realistic representation of what the actual site is like. So that works in our favor. Now, in this final stage, we taught students to create a VR movie on RoundMe, a browser-based panoramic tour builder platform on YouTube. And in the interest of time, I'm going to kind of jump ahead, but this was basically how we walked them through the process of editing their stories. Now, to the outcomes of the content creation experience and the meaning that students and teachers constructed through this co-learning process, So one of the teachers from Mumbai shared, just being able to grasp the topic in any way, the kids never really realize the significance of these issues. I could care less about the facts that they learn in science, about preserving the environment and best farming practices. What they really got out of this project is the realization that respecting farmers or the environment is crucial. And also sharing kind of what actually happened in the case of in Atlanta in hunger and homelessness. So at the beginning of the study, we asked students to write out words that came to their mind when they thought of hunger and homelessness, and these are the words that they shared. So broke, smelly, depressed, dirty, dangerous, addicts, unwanted, frightening, mean. These were all the words that we heard from them. But after they went through the exercise, one student said, I learned that everyone's situation isn't the same, so you just can't judge people based on how they look or what perceptions you may have of them. Another student reflected on her initial response, saying, I learned that most of the stereotypes aren't true. Most homeless people could look just like you and me. People think it's the homeless person's fault that they are homeless, but that is so wrong. The understanding that homelessness cannot be solved in a day, and this is actually a very long and hard process, was widely recognized in the comments that we received throughout, and some students acknowledged this was a new lesson for them. So where might we go from here? Now, integration in new contexts and domains. Our work focuses on learning environments where there are well-defined roles for learners and educators, but the everyday context that we explore shares many similarities with other in-the-wild informal learning environments, which we're also exploring, where learners and educators might relate in several other ways. These environments could include hospital settings with doctors, health workers, and patients. They could also include homes and workplaces of various kinds, where VR might allow individuals to engage with and gain expertise in diverse domains. With regards to methods for integration, what we were really focusing on was looking at a technology that is quite hyped. How do we think about the integration of this in ways that are affordable by learning environments that are not so well resourced? Given how new VR still is to the average user, it's essential for us to consider how to support the meaning-making process of stakeholders that are unfamiliar to this and to other technologies. And finally, exploring new geographies. So it's important to address how we align VR experiences with the goals of a new geographical location, which is also a new socio-technical system with a new culture, new stakeholders, new value systems, in ways that require minimal intrusion or deviation of user behavior, but also make a deep impact on further desired outcomes. And there's really lots of potential future directions for this work to proceed in. Aditya, the first author, is exploring these for his PhD now at Stanford. That brings me to the end of my talk. We're grateful to Vikas, which was the school that allowed us to do this work in Mumbai, and also the summer camp that we did in Atlanta. And of course, I'm very grateful to Aditya for putting together these slides, for putting his heart and soul into this study, and for taking this work forward for his PhD. Yes, as I said, please feel free to tweet to him, at him. Thank you for listening.
That's fantastic. So, questions again, if you can.
You mentioned that storyboarding wasn't perceived as really valuable to the students. Did that change in the end, or was it a problem at all? Would you change methods towards storyboarding?
Yeah, that's really, I think the thing that I was trying to kind of bring out in the talk was that they were really impatient to kind of move further ahead. And they wanted to be able to start shooting with the camera right away and start using the technology right away, because that was where sort of the charisma was, right? But we did reflect on the process with the teachers. I wouldn't say so much with the students, but the teachers definitely saw value in kind of laying out the plan for the students and for them to actually think about how they would place different objects and different people in their storyboard.
Over here. So I guess listening to this talk, it seemed like the focus was less on how the VR content was received by people after it was created and more on the act of having students go out, experience these situations, and create this content. So in that regard, how did you find working with 360 video any different than just having students do this with a regular 2D camera?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I can tell you that we get that question a lot when we talk about this particular project. So I would say, and that's something that we're thinking about and we're also exploring, and we've done some follow-on work with contrasting the two, so looking at different modalities and having students engage. I would say that the focus for this study was really to kind of see that, okay, we have this technology that is quite hyped and that is, it seems inaccessible to these learning environments. And so what we found from our prior work that I briefly mentioned was that people really wanted to see what the value could be for VR in their learning environment. So the teachers who we kind of co-designed this experience with really wanted to see what VR could hold as possibilities for the learning context. Now, there are some affordances that I think are specific to VR, like the whole kind of focus on perspective taking. So for them to use this camera to really see, like, this is me, what the camera is kind of presenting is me as a person. So if I'm the homeless person, what do I see? Like, this is my environment. So I think that is an affordance that is slightly different as opposed to like a 2D video. So that is kind of what we found. In terms of just like going through the exercise, I would say there's certainly the factor that it's much more attractive than 2D simply because it is new and it is unfamiliar to them. I would say in terms of actually engaging with the content and what the learning, so one way to do this is to do kind of pre-test and post-test and compare the two, right? And so that's what we're doing right now. But I would say that there isn't that much difference aside from the students' own involvement as a result of this exercise.
That's great. So I think that's all we have time for. So let's give a round of applause to Neha
Thank you.
and to the first author who